Today's episode is brought to you by Roll and Play Press.
If you're a fan of Dungeons & Dragons, stick around to the end of today's episode to hear more about Roll & Play's essential D&D products. Click the link below to learn more.
Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Pete, Films and Stuff. How are you today?
I am great, Ethan. How are you?
I'm great as well. And it is time for Stream or Skip, our very popular new segment where you and I randomly assign each other a new series to watch. And we watch a few episodes and give our take on whether or not it is worth streaming or whether we should just skip it.
That's right. And what's important is that the shows we make each other watch are not ones that you and I would normally watch.
Therein lies the torture sometimes.
Sometimes. And it forces us to go out of our wheelhouse, which is, I think, an important element of really evaluating each of the streaming platforms that are available to us.
Let's recap. What was your homework? What were you assigned?
So this week, I had to watch HBO Max's Visitors.
I have no idea what this is about. I would guess aliens?
I had to double check with you twice. And the reason was, it is an HBO Max show. It's been produced and made by Warner Brothers. But it's a French TV show.
What?
Exactly. It's in French. And
really?
That's why I had to check with you, is because I wasn't sure. And it got to a point where I was like, wait, am I just watching it in French accidentally? Like, what am I doing wrong? Did I set something wrong on my app? No, it's a French show.
Yeah.
It's a comedy, but not a sitcom. So it's not a traditional sitcom. It is a comedy.
Okay.
And I have to say that, so living in London, I have been exposed to continental European TV shows. And I will say that this is not your typical French comedy. I would say that this show is decidedly American in its humor. So it's not dry comedy like you would expect. And there are definitely moments that made me think of Police Squad, Airplane, like things like Leslie Nielsen, like
slapstick.
The Loaded Weapon.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little slapstick, a little bit of, wordplay, that kind of humor. And have you watched the show Resident Alien with Alan Tudyk?
I have not. I've never even heard of that.
Actually, I would recommend that to you. I think it's a very enjoyable show. I think you might enjoy it as well.
Resident Alien? Okay.
Resident Alien, and it seems very much like Resident Alien in its humor.
Okay.
The show overall has a slight Back to the Future and Stranger Things vibe in its soundtrack, which all the more makes it feel more like an American show than it does a French show. And the premise is super simple. You have this down-on-the-luck protagonist has become a police officer. He's in a very not good relationship with his girlfriend. She's kind of like a bully. She seems to be the one who wears the quote-unquote pants in the relationship. She's doing very well financially. She's a successful professional estate agent. He seems to be... When I say down on the luck, he's being bullied by his high school bully still. His colleagues at the police station are all very terrible. They're all very rude to him, and they're kind of like giving him all the crap jobs to do. And that kind of thing. And then he's the only one who believes that there's some kind of mystery involving a UFO crash. And of course, all of his colleagues dismiss him as crazy. In the first episode and in the second episode, he meets an alien who's a humanoid who can speak perfect French. He's the only one who takes it seriously. And that's kind of where I stopped. It's not that it's a bad show. There were a couple of things that led it to be... Normally, I think this would have been in my wheelhouse if it were maybe in English.
Okay.
But, my French is rusty. I haven't studied French since college. So the first episode, I gave it my wholehearted best. I listened to the first half of it in French. I tried to go for it, and I got maybe 60-70% of it, and everything else I was able to deduce. But then I gave up. I was like, listen, I have to put subtitles on. I put subtitles on. It was fine. It wasn't bad, but it didn't do anything for me. I would say that overall for me, because of the nature of the show, I would have normally thought this would have been a mooch, but by the end of it, I was just like, you know what? I'm skipping. I'm out. It just didn't do anything for me.
Okay. Well, that's good. At least we know. Sorry to assign you that. Didn't realize.
No, that's it. That's the way the dice rolled.
That is the way the dice rolled, although I put it on the list for you. But I had The Mayor of Kingstown, which is on Paramount Plus. So this is really a good test to see whether or not Paramount Plus is worth subscribing to. I had to do a free trial subscription to get access to this. It stars Jeremy Renner. That's the headlining star. And the background to the show is this. There's 3 brothers. One is a mayor, one is a police officer, and Jeremy Renner is just kind of a something. These brothers live in the town where the major employer or thing is a maximum security prison. And it shows essentially the balance that everyone has to go through to kind of keep the peace within and outside the prison. Jeremy Renner's brother, the mayor, is murdered, and therefore Renner kind of takes the unofficial family role of being this, let's say, quote-unquote intermediary who's the deal maker to kind of keep the peace. So an example would be, let's say a guard's family is being harassed, by a inmate's family or relatives outside, and Renner will do something to give the inmate some type of small benefit or comfort so that he instructs his family to stop harassing, the prison guard's family or something, right? Or someone is thrown in.
He's a fixer?
He's a little bit of a fixer. So if you've ever watched The Wire, it's very similar to that, where the effect is that life is not good or evil. It's not so black and white and clear who are the good guys or the bad guys. There's always compromises to be made. And, those compromises are sometimes made for the better good, even though they may not actually be the right thing to do. So if you like these, law enforcement prison type dramas, it's extremely well produced, very, very well acted, great scripts, generally pretty good plots. For me, this is not really my type of show, only because the entire premise of each episode, and there are obviously recurring, storylines that are ongoing, but basically every episode is centered around some event that happens, and then they have to go through all these kind of hoops to kind of resolve the issue or fix the issue. And a lot of times it's just well, man, if this person wouldn't have done that, they wouldn't have to waste all this time and effort and favors and fixing, to kind of resolve the issue. So for me, it's not really my type of show. I would say, for me personally, it's a skip. If it's your type of show, it's a mooch. I don't really see anything that's compelling about this to say that it's a must subscribe. But I think the reviews are pretty good. Jeremy Renner's a big name. He's a very good actor. And everything else is very, very high quality, well produced. It's just really not my type of show. So I think this week we have 2 skips. Do you want to roll the virtual dice, and shall we see what we've got for the next round?
I have already done so.
Oh.
And for this coming week, you, my friend, will be watching Carnival Row on Amazon Prime.
Carnival Row? Wow, what is that about?
I have no idea, but I hope it's not got clowns in it.
Okay, what do you have?
And I have Netflix's show Flaked.
Huh.
I do not know anything about that either.
I hope it's about cooking.
I have
or
been
dandruff.
For,
or dandruff.
All right. Well, I've been hoping for a cooking show this entire time, but unfortunately, no luck there.
Pete, if we have a minute, would you be willing to dive down a rabbit hole with me?
Of course. We all have all the time in the world. That's how this format works.
That's how this works. You know, I was thinking a lot about kind of like the different genres of shows, right? There's a lot of police shows. There's a lot of lawyer shows. There's a lot of aliens and vampires and blah-de-blah-de-blah, right? What's an industry or a sector or a theme that you think is kind of non-existent or underrepresented? Like, have you ever thought like, hey, there's no show about insurance adjusters, right? Or there's no show about cruise ship workers. Make something up or brainstorm it.
Yeah, so I think there are certain... You raise a good point, right? So when we think of network television, there are lots of medical dramas.
Yes.
There's lots of legal dramas.
Yes.
There's lots of police procedurals,
yes.
right? All of these shows, I think, are very... They're very numerous because they lend themselves to the procedural aspect.
Yep.
You don't need a running storyline between every episode. You can have 20 different murders over one season of CSI.
Yep.
You can have 20 different medical cases over one series of House or whatever it is, right? And the same goes for your legal dramas. So I think that's why we see so many of these quote unquote procedural shows. When you start thinking about, to use your example, in insurance adjusters, I think that those kinds of shows, because the nature of the profession itself is so either banal or so niche, I think those might be more tuned to something like a reality series. Like, for example, we don't see any shows about real estate agents. But if you look at one of the more popular reality shows out there, Selling Sunset, that's a show exclusively focused on real estate agents, but it's wrapped in the patina of a reality show, not in the patina of it's a procedural, because how many episodes do you want to see about a guy selling a house? Yeah. Or the other way to do it is to say, like, where they do those house renovation shows where they like, like the Property Brothers kind of thing. They take a house, they flip it in one episode and they sell it onward. That is also kind of, because that's a little bit more like game showy type. Yeah. There's a little bit of gamification going on in there, and you get to see the tangible results, right? You bought it for $100, you spent $50 on it, you sold it for $500. Oh my God, you made $350 in profit. That's amazing. I think people are tuned to that.
What about agriculture? I mean, didn't Jeremy Clarkson, right?
Yeah, so that's the thing, is that's kind of like a docu-series. It's not a TV show like your traditional TV show. It's more like a documentary. He's structured it more in a documentary. He bought a farm out in the middle of nowhere, and it details and shows you the trials and tribulations that farmers in England have to go through to get their things, to be able to grow whatever they want to grow, sell whatever they want to sell.
But like, Yellowstone, right? With Kevin Costner was kind of at the time a little bit unique, right? There aren't a lot of shows about like ranching, right? Absolutely. So I mean, if you had Kevin Costner as an Iowa corn farmer, right? Yeah. I mean, suddenly you'll see like 2 or 3 other shows about like, okay, now someone's like a cattle farmer, now someone's a dairy farmer, now someone's a avocado farmer in California, right? I mean, what other, I was just kind of thinking about this because again, like when I was watching Mayor of Kingstown, it's a prison show, more or less, right? And I'm
Okay.
like, well, it's kind of like this, or it's kind of like this, right? Like Orange is the New Black is a prison show,
Prison
but
Break.
it's kind of right. Prison Break, and even The Wire, for example, is maybe not prison, but it was law enforcement, the criminal system kind of stuff, right?
Adjacent. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I was thinking. Like, what if you're pitching a show, right? And we talked about this a little bit because we talked about what's this new show on. Is it Amazon or Netflix with Jamie Foxx and Snoop Dogg?
It's on Netflix. Day Shift,
right? This is about vampires, right?
Yeah.
There's a bajillion vampire shows out there, right? If you go to Netflix and say, hey, I've got this great idea for a vampire show. They're like, hey, man, like we've got 10 scripts right now for vampire shows, right? Sexy vampires, crazy vampires, alien vampires, zombie vampires.
Yeah. This was the business side of vampires, I think, right?
Business vampires, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, okay, not a lot of farming. Let's brainstorm, like, over the coming episodes, like, what sector is, like, ripe for a new show?
Maybe something in the illicit industries. So,
Escorts.
and I think that they've showed a lot of, you've got a lot of traction with shows like Ozark, which showed really money laundering and drugs. Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, which is again a little bit more about drugs. And these are long form dramas, right? So it's not episodic in the sense that it's episodic, but it's not, a procedural.
Yeah.
Every episode is not an independent episode. Mm-hmm. So I think so, and I think that people have this thing for something in the vice industries. They have an allure to it because, drugs are bad, but I would love to watch more and learn more about it because the stigma around drugs is so bad, right?
Yeah.
So and I don't mean things like marijuana because there are a bunch of sitcoms and there are a bunch of smaller dramas like Weeds, etc. about that. I mean like really illicit activities.
Yeah.
I think that's probably something that's maybe a little bit more possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, when you're talking about sex and things like that, you've got like, True TV and HBO has done a bunch of things like, and Showtime has done a bunch of reality shows based on that, like Gigolos and, I don't even know. There must be so many that are, where they kind of go through the day in the life of an escort or something like that.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there are loads out there. But I think that if you were to look into something like that, it's hard to come up with another genre which would be procedural. You'd have to look at each individual, I guess, industry or job and see, like you could do forensic accounting theoretically, right? And have 20 episodes of 20 different financial crimes. But then that becomes very close to being a police procedural again.
I mean, there's not a lot of you could do like a PI show, right? There aren't a lot of like PI shows. But again, you are crossing the line a little bit into kind of CSI and stuff like that, right?
CSI, or maybe even like,
Miami
they had
Vice,
that Dog the Bounty Hunter, the reality show. I feel like it's a very difficult thing at this day and age to create a new genre of a TV show.
But there will be, right? Someone's going to come up with something, just like there's Yellowstone, and people are like, oh man, like, why didn't I think of this? But
I would argue that Yellowstone, for example, isn't a genre. I think that Yellowstone is just a different. It's a drama. It's not a
family
procedural.
drama. It's a family drama.
Exactly. It's a long form family drama. And we always made that joke, right?
Or action
Yellowstone
drama.
is more or less just like Succession. It's just that one takes place in Montana and is about ranching,
Absolutely.
and the other takes place in New York and is about a family empire in carnivals and media.
Yes.
So I think that these are just long-form dramas. And if you're thinking of long-form dramas, then yes, you could think about shows that are like in ice fishing or, like in the transportation or shipping industry. There could be a long-form drama where a family owns a struggling shipping empire, or something like that. I don't know. That's something different. I don't think I've ever seen a show like that.
Put that in the back of your mind and let's come up with the next genre that's going to be super hot, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the things go in waves, right? There's so many copycats. But, I mean, right now I feel like, the aliens, the werewolves, the vampires, all these kind of like mythical beasts, I think were I think it's very difficult to get these shows greenlit, right? And then there used to be kind of like all these Games of Thrones spinoffs, right? Which is everything kind of like these period Middle Ages or medieval type dramas as well, right?
Fantasy-esque.
Yes. Yeah. And all these are, I mean, it's not like there will never be another one, but it would be very difficult to pitch this to HBO, to Netflix, to Amazon, to anyone, and be like, hey, this is the next thing. Be like, like, there's been a lot of these, right? But if you say, okay, this is a show about insurance adjusters, I agree. No one gets excited, but at least it's like, well,
it's a new field.
I'm listening. Like, you got 30 seconds to sell it to me. I haven't heard this before. Tell me why people would be fascinated by insurance adjusters, right?
Or, as we kind of touched upon a few weeks ago, what if they start doing more interactive kind of shows?
Yeah.
Right? Where you're talking about the same kind of drama, the same kind of procedural, but like, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, you get to make the decision on screen as to what the character does next.
So actually, this is very, very powerful, I guess, from a monetization standpoint.
Yeah.
Because just like, I mean, we've all watched shows, you're like, you know what? Either they killed off my favorite character or I hate that character, and you kind of lose interest for one reason or another, right? And in theory, if you're choosing your own outcomes, you should not lose interest in the show, right?
Absolutely.
If I'm watching For All Mankind, you're like, hey, you would have killed off Karen right away and said, hey, I hate Karen. I like this show. Let's get rid of Karen and I'll watch more. And I would have said, keep Karen, let's get rid of Margot, and I'd keep watching the show, right? So in theory, you're reinforcing yourself by, getting more of what you want and eliminating what you don't want in shows. I guess it's probably easier for, I want to say like animation or something that's like AI, where it would be a little bit easier to kind of like cobble together like different scenarios. Whereas like if it's live action, you need to like film again and again and again.
So many different outcomes. Yeah.
So maybe a little bit easier for
someone's going to crack it. I hope it's us, but if they do a D&D TV series where you get to make the decisions on screen, I'm telling you, I think that's going to be the next wave.
How would that work, though? How would that work? You're the D&D grandmaster. I am the novice.
So the way I envision it is like the old school choose your own adventure books. You start watching the show, and 10 minutes into the show, there's a point where you can choose 2 or 3 options. And you choose those 2 or 3 options, and you have an on-screen dice roller or something to determine whether that was successful or not, and then the result of that plays out on the screen.
How many scenarios would you have over the course of a 12 episode season? Like if you mapped out how many
scenarios, I would probably do no more than 2 or 3 scenarios
per episode,
plus 1 or 2 battle scenarios per episode. Max.
So maybe
I wouldn't want to do more.
2 decisions, 1 battle.
Or the other way around. But I would say 3, maybe maximum 4 interactive moments per episode. And I don't think that's too burdensome, because if you're talking about a 40-minute episode or a 1-hour-long episode, that means the equivalent of maybe recording 2 hours worth of content. So it's not tremendously burdensome.
Didn't you write this book already?
I did.
So you just need to take the book and make it into a show.
Oh my God! If I had the resources and the connections, I certainly would pitch it.
I've got good news for you. You are the proud owner of a prominent podcast.
That's true. That's true.
So,
we both are.
I'm not sure about your monetization of that, but in terms of resources, you have a global audience.
You're my business manager, right? You can tell me whether we're doing this the right thing or not. So Netflix, if you're listening, reach out to Ethan.
You know who is listening? Great show he wants somehow the good folks at For All Mankind are listening, because they have followed
That's
exactly what we've been predicting for weeks and weeks and weeks. So
That's true.
at least someone from
So I
Apple
guess
TV
if you've
Plus,
got an in at Apple TV, we've
please.
got a great idea for you, and it will certainly be a welcome addition to your fledgling channel.
I think you can do this, but I think that it needs to be on a, this is the type of thing that would be picked up on like Sci-Fi Channel, and it'd be done very, very, just like Expanse, right?
Yeah.
You'll struggle for a year and a half on Sci-Fi, where the critics will love it, and there will be super, super passionate fan base, but it's barely making anything. And Sci-Fi is like, should we renew it or not? And Amazon comes in and says, you know what, we'll take
Saves
it.
the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fine. I don't mind. Jeff Bezos, if you're listening, I've got a great pitch for you.
Should we do that with our podcast? Press 1 if you'd like to hear more about Mayor of Kingstown. Press 2 if you want to hear more about Carnival Row, right?
Press 3, hablar español.
Okay, so that means we are done with stream or skip. We've got 2 skips this week. I've got high hopes for Carnival Row, not knowing anything about it, and Flaked, not knowing anything about it. Maybe cooking shows, maybe
Probably
about
not.
dandruff.
But you'll find out a week from now.
Indeed you will. Okay. Pete, I think that's it for us. Next episode, we're going to be talking about the big one, Sandman on Netflix.
Listen out for that one.
Yes, yes. Okay, everyone. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next episode. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. This episode was brought to you by our friends at Roll and Play Press.
Pete, I know that you're a huge tabletop gamer. Tell me more about their products.
You got it, Ethan. Roll and Play Press recently sent us a copy of the Game Master's Fantasy Toolkit, and let me tell you, as a dungeon master, this book has been a lifesaver. I'm a pretty good storyteller, but I'm definitely not the best of improvisers. That's where I believe Roll and Play's toolkit really shines. Need the name of a random shifty-eyed villagers? Want to figure out what was in that treasure chest your players just opened? Heck, do you need a filler quest for when your players inevitably veer off your meticulously designed plan? The Game Master's Fantasy Toolkit is exactly what you need. I've had to use it multiple times already, and my players have been none the wiser, which only made me look super prepared. Honestly, I will forevermore have this book behind my DM screen.
That's amazing. Where can people get this fantasy toolkit?
Visit rollandplaypress.com. The link is in the description below. In addition to the Game Master's Fantasy Toolkit, the website also has a bunch of other books that are aimed at making your life as a dungeon master or as a player much easier.
Thanks, Pete. And everyone can check out the link below in our episode notes and visit their website today.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.